Hello there. This is Mr. Cole with another review for the movies. I haven't posted anything recently because I've been quite busy, but I wanted to update my page and start doing regular movie posts. So, my first one I'll be talking about today is the 2018 version of Halloween. So, for this review, I'm going to be giving some background or an overview of the movie. I will tell you the actors or actresses that I feel stand out of this movie. And then I will give you, in my humble opinion, what my overall scoring of this movie is, whether or not you should see it. And because of the unique position I am in, with being in the theater business, I can tell you from seeing fan reactions and having a chance to actually speak to people who have watched the movies and get the opinion of the people themselves viewing the movie, which I think is missed with a lot of critics. Um, so, the brief overview. Halloween is a movie, I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong in my page, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. It was made in about the late 70s, mid 80s, about 78, going into 80. And if anyone knows the background to the horror genre, then they know that slasher films were a big thing in the 80s. And I like to call them the top three sort of figures in this genre were Freddy, Jason Voorhees, and of course, Michael Myers. Michael Myers and Jason being the top big ones that always seem to compete with each other. And with this film, there's been a lot of sequels. And this film really tries to do away with the timeline. Halloween in general has, I believe it was up to, I want to say like 8 sequels. Um, and each one tried to keep a coherent story. And then you had Rob Zombie with like a reboot to the franchise that had two. Each of these films, the main ones up to Halloween H2O were supposed to follow the very first film. And the Halloween, I believe it's 3, Season of the Witch, was kind of its own thing. And then the Rob Zombie films were standalone, trying to, as I stated before, reboot the franchise. This film is unique in the sense that it totally and completely ignores everything that came after. It is a direct sequel set 40 years after the events of the first film. So if you're worried about not seeing the other Halloween movies to understand this storyline, you don't have to worry about that. It completely resets. Really, you only have to see the first film to understand some of the characters and the development. So this Halloween is set 40 years later, and our main character, once again helmed by Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, has become a recluse of sorts, and having had her own family, a daughter who has had a child of her own and is married and everything, their relationship is strained due to Laurie's first encounter with Michael Myers. She knows of the fact that he seems to have this obsession with her and the people around her, and sort of like really just lives away from everyone in a house that's built like a fortress, basically. And these reporters come and they go to see Michael Myers, who was captured and put in this insane asylum. Uh, and they want to know about the killings and whatnot. So that's a brief overview. I don't want to tell you too much because this is not spoilers. So I don't want to give too much of the story away. So I'm going to just kind of stop right there. And it's a pretty simplistic story, it's not too hard to follow. Um, Now, to the good points of the film. First and foremost, there is a new director who is helming this, David Green. But John Carpenter, who created the original Halloween, is a co producer of sorts. And you could tell by the way the film is shot that he clearly had a heavy influence in this film. Now, the pros for me is the camera work is exceptional. The camera work was very reminiscent of the old 70s Halloween and how you had those tense sequences, very narrow view of vision. Um, there were a couple of scenes where you would see like Michael standing behind someone, and as an audience, we see them, but the person is talking on the phone or talking to a friend, and they're not really capturing what's going on behind them until it's too late. So there was a lot of throwbacks. And as far as the actors, I'd say Jamie Lee Curtis, and then forgive me for the life of me, I don't know who plays her daughter, but they both did very well, and they really had a good back and forth. And Jamie Lee Curtis to me did exceptionally the best because of playing up to someone who suffered a traumatic experience and seeing not only how that affected her, but sort of the next generations that came after. You know, her deep rooted paranoia affected her daughter, and the way that they dive into that and they show the strain in the relationship. And it's not a completely, I hate my mom and I never want to see her, but it's more of a, I avoid her because I don't believe what she said. And really, the also great thing is the town itself and how it's got kind of an eerie feel to it, but yet at the same time, it's got a very like you could live there kind of feel. And how people know of the events, but much like tragedies and incidents that happen, they chose to forget or kind of remove that part of the town's history. But in whispers, even in the younger crowd, you can see where Michael has his legend has kind of left an imprint on this town. And 40 years later, the town's kind of forgotten about it, but he's still talked about. Hence the name the Boogeyman, accurately given, because his story is like a legend, an urban myth that no one believes until this Halloween rolls around. Now, as far as it goes, I personally saw a lot of the younger kids going in to see this film, and I myself wouldn't recommend it for that kind of a crowd. But as far as our ratings go, this was a uh, very throwback to the original ways that slashers were made, in the sense that there was violence and it was pretty gruesome, but at the same time, compared to the things that have come out that kind of pushed the genre, Saw and those kind of movies, this was more on the tame side. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of brutal scenes, but I think where this movie did justice to what horror originally was the fact that some of Michael's kills were more jarring because they happened off screen. And I like the old school horror where your the directors played on your mind. What you saw on screen sometimes is not as intense as what you feel when they don't show you something. For instance, there's a particular person who gets brutally killed by Michael. And it's an older lady, but the kill itself, they show him like picking up a hammer. They show him going towards this lady, her screaming, but they don't show the physical act, and then they show what happened afterwards. And it's things like this that I think wrap up the intensity of the film. Um, so my issues or my negatives with this film, I felt that the younger cast that they put in this film were kind of an unnecessary side plot. I understand the merging of two generations, okay? You have the younger generation that kind of doesn't know anything about this incident. And then you have the older generation, Laurie Strode, her daughter, the police deputy now, who the original sheriff from the film apparently passed away. But if you watch the original, the guy who plays the new sheriff was actually in the original film as the deputy. So he was the one who shot Michael out of the window, apparently, but didn't kill him when he had a chance. So when it comes back to hunting him again, he is on a mission to kill Michael Myers because he realizes that he is truly the epitome of evil. And I like those storylines. But then there's storylines with the younger Strode. And when she was interacting with Jamie Lee Curtis's character, she did a good job. And they bounced off of each other nicely. But the scenes with like the school party and her best friend and him revealing he had a crush on her and all this other nonsense, and you'll know what I mean when you watch the movie, I felt was unnecessary. Kind of felt like to pad out this 2-hour film. And there was a lot of other storylines that didn't particularly go anywhere. There was a storyline with the psychiatrist. You guys will know when you get to that scene that having a great psychiatrist like Dr. Loomis from the original film, who realized that this child that he had taken in and tried to help couldn't be helped. He was the epitome of all that's evil. And this guy kind of destroyed that whole storyline. And the way he was played, it was just terrible. And like I said, some of the younger actors were horrible and just the typical throwaway characters that, because Michael needs to, I guess, take out so many people per film, they just felt like useless. And also the daughter of Laurie Strode, her daughter, I felt didn't really have an importance to the story. I mean, she was just kind of there as a catalyst for Michael to chase, but her storyline really led nowhere. She has a storyline with her boyfriend, and his character kind of ended up nowhere. And I don't know if this was a setup for a sequel, but I felt it was very useless and it slowed down the film tremendously. Um, and also, my issue was pacing. When the film had Michael in it, it was very fast paced, brutal, um, very much like a Halloween. When Jamie Lee Curtis was in it, it also felt like the story was moving along. We were getting some interesting backstory and kind of figuring out from her perspective what it was like to live through a traumatic experience. But everyone else's characters just felt like they had nothing to do. Like the main focus was on Laurie and Michael and their big confrontation. And the first act was great, I thought, with the reporters and wanting to sort of wake up this beast. And particularly the scene in the gas station, you guys will know what I mean, was just marvelously done and really showed Michael come into form. Now, with that being said, it was weird because the first and the third act of the film were outstanding, but the whole middle part felt like the director had no sense of how to get from point A to point B in the story, and it really slows down the pacing of the film. Generally, even when you have moments in films where the plot has to slow down to explain backstory or to introduce its characters, each character that's introduced in the film generally has a character arc. And while he did do a good job of setting up Michael and Laurie's arc and the family and how it all comes full circle at the end, and I think he tied up the plot points nicely, except for the fact that he added some exposition that really wasn't needed. And he made some characters feel like they were useless. So when they died, you didn't really care because these characters weren't really fleshed out enough for us to get a sense of why we should even care that they're being hunted and killed by this serial killer. Which in a horror film, I believe the best horror films are the ones where you're rooting for the survivors. It's the tension building with your favorite character, like, look behind you or there's someone on the stairs. And a good horror movie, even minor characters, can make us feel something for them when we're like, oh man, we've grown attached. A perfect example that I like to go back to a lot is Scream. My favorite character was not even a main character in the story. He was this kid who worked at the video store, played by I want to say Jamie Kennedy. He played this film geek who knew everything about horror movies, and he helped drive the plot, but he was not essential to it. And as he was being chased by our main antagonist and the slasher, his character was so lovable, you wanted him to pull through. And at the end of the film, when he did, you were happy. But here in this movie, there's none of that. Most of the secondary characters, you're like, I don't even know who this guy is or why I care. I mean, really, there was only one side character, and you'll understand. He's this little boy who's being babysitted, and he was the only kid that you really had a lot of personality, even though he had such short screen time to where you were like, oh, all right, I don't want him to kill this kid because he's kind of cool. And I think that's where this movie kind of fails to deliver. And also, the end of the film is very and left to a lot of interpretations. It feels like if they ended it right there, then I would be happy with that. But if they try to set up for a sequel, I really don't see what direction they go in and where the story goes. And considering Jamie Lee Curtis said she was done with the franchise after this movie, I understand how they would continue this. So now, my overall opinion of the film. I think that it is a great throwback to the 70s Halloween. I think if you put it in context to all the Halloweens that have come before it, uh, it is much better directed, much better acted, way better written. And it really captured uh, stronger character development than the first films. Now, do I think that it tops the original? Not. That's a hard one. I don't think it tops the original, but I don't think that it does it a disservice. I think that it is the sequel that should have happened years ago. And I think that if John Carpenter hadn't been forced to make the changes and do the things with the characters that he did in the second movie, this would have been a great sequel that should have happened. All these years later, it's grossing a lot of money. And segueing right into my part of what the audience thinks, I've had a lot of mixed emotions. The younger crowd liked it. The older crowd liked it and didn't like it. So I think this is a movie or one of those horror movies that falls into the realm of you got to go see it yourself and kind of judge for yourself. If you're a horror fan like I am, you'll appreciate the throwbacks to the original. There's a particular kill you'll remember from the first film. And like I said, the camera work, the lighting, the mood, and even the person who plays Michael Myers, speaking of which, and giving a shout out to whoever does Michael, an older Michael. I mean, they don't show a complete version of his face, but what they do show is kind of really haunting and eerie. And the detail they put into showing that he wasn't unscathed by his encounter with Laurie. I mean, he's got a scar on his eye where they shot him and things like that. I thought that was a great attention to detail. That this mythic character could be hurt. I mean, in a sense, he's evil, but he's still human, and he still get cuts when he still bleeds when he gets cut. He still could be shot. He still could be knocked out and things like that. But I feel like what makes him terrifying is not knowing why he does what he does and not knowing what drives him. Just an innate sense to kill and almost an epitome and a core of evil. He personifies everything that scares us, you know, people, serial killers, and things like that that are truly evil men that's only motive is to wreak chaos. And I think that's where this film works. And if you enjoy films such as that, you're going to enjoy this film immensely. If you go in to exclude this from the rest of the Halloweens and see this as the direct sequel that it is, then you're going to enjoy the film. If you're looking for continuity, it's not here. If you're looking for something that's going to win awards for acting, definitely not. But if you're looking for a good, scary, sort of Halloween film that pays homage to what's come before, then this is the movie for you. This is Mr. Cole for my review, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you do, please hit that subscribe button. And in the comments below, tell me what you think of the film. Did you go to see it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you think they could have did better? And all of that jazz. Thank you very much, and enjoy your day. Go see those